Jnanetrita Seta Sen Nukheka Nubraku Nupara Nukheka Nukheka Discover Natarian philosophy through music, through video lectures, and through books by Sebai Dr. Muata Ashby. Peace be with you. This is our opening lecture at our year 2006 Unitarian Conference. This particular talk is going to be entitled, This is Our Religion. It's going to have some elements that many of you have perhaps seen, but there are actually going to be some added elements that you have not seen. And hopefully we'll take a little time to go into details as to what religion is supposed to be and what our religion is all about. The question of religion is an extremely important topic to humanity and always has been from the beginning of when people were able to reach a level of social culture where they had time to think about such things as what is religion and where do we come from, what is God, and who am I, and where do I come from, and what is my purpose, and so on and so forth. So, of course, as humanity has developed, and we hesitate to use the word evolved, but let's say it has developed, that question has become even more of an issue as all the religions have developed, especially in the last 2,000 years, and how religion has led us to a situation where humanity seems to be on the brink of self-destruction because of religion, among other things. Probably we say two things. Religion and greed are the two main issues that are leading humanity to the brink of self-destruction. So we'll begin here, and then we'll get into our discussion as we go along. Just so that we are all on the same page, although I don't think we have to be on the same page with the group that is here, but for anyone else who is watching this presentation, ancient Egypt is located in the northeastern corner of the continent of Africa, and it came in before all of these other cultures, before the Sungay Empire, the Ghana Empire, before Alexander, before the Roman Empire, before the Greeks, before all of these cultures and civilizations and empires, there was Kemet. It's important for us to realize that. Before the Indians came in, before the Chinese civilization, there was Kemet. Kemet was the first that we know of in history, the first organized culture civilization that we can actually call a culture and civilization with an advanced religious philosophy. There are other people beginning to do farming, beginning to organize in other parts of the world, but Kemet was the first one to have high culture, what we can consider high culture, which means a civilized society, which means a social order, an organization for distribution of goods, farming, etc., and as a religious philosophy, as well as a social philosophy called Ma'at, that was designed for the benefit of all human beings in the society. Other societies may have had organization under the gun, as they say, under the sword, which is a dictatorship or a despotic and so on and so forth. That we don't consider civilization. The ancient Kemetans themselves say that they came from the south, that they were colonists from the land that is today known as Sudan. Sudan, what we call Sudan today, was actually called Kash by the ancient Egyptians, and this word has been transformed into Kush in modern times. The ancient or the modern day Sudan is also what the ancient Greeks called Ethiopia. The Ethiopia of today is actually to the south. You see where the E is here on the map? Actually, maybe you can see, we can go back a little bit. Here is the land of Sudan that we're talking about. Up here is Egypt, above that. And here is the modern day Ethiopia, with Haile Selassie and all the modern culture of Ethiopia. That is not the ancient Ethiopia. The modern Ethiopia is not the ancient Ethiopia that ancient Egyptians came from. However, all of these people in ancient times, around the area of the Great Lakes, Uganda, what is today called Kenya, Ethiopia, Sudan, Congo region, the ancients who developed in the Nilotic region, the region of the Nile, all these people here were of the same ethnic culture, and the ancient Egyptians were part of that ancient culture. The name for Kemet is the hieroglyphic text. The hieroglyphic text word is here, KMT, and comes from the word Kam, which means blackness or darkness. Also, the word Kash means blackness or darkness. So the two words, Kemet and Kash, mean land of blackness, land of darkness. Of course, the people are people of the black land and the people of the dark land. Now, here is a picture that most of you have seen. This is a picture, the tomb of the governor of Hui. And now these people here, has everyone seen this picture? Yes? No? Okay. Of course you know that these are the Ethiopians, and these are Egyptians. And there are some more Egyptians here in the front. Here is a modern day Ethiopian man, or shall I say Nubian, is the better term. So we can have it more clear as we're talking about the ancient. And the idea here to understand is that the ancient Nubians look like the ancient Egyptians. Here's a picture of the front part of the scene. They have a better look. Okay. Actually, this slide was supposed to be after this one, but let's go and do that. What is religion? Religion is, the term religion in English comes from the Latin term religare. Re means to do again, to do over. And legar means to join. So to rejoin. And what are you supposed to be rejoining with? You're supposed to be rejoining something that has been separated, right? In religious terminology, the soul has separated from God. And the process or the practice of religion is supposed to be dedicated to rejoining that whole that has been separated. The soul has separated from spirit like a drop of water separates from the ocean. Only that in some religions, this process of rejoining is seen differently. We're going to discuss that just a little bit. Religion is an extremely important aspect of culture. Probably the reason is because most people realize that life is, how shall we put it, bogus. Most people don't put it that way, of course, but most people realize that, most people feel that, because as you grow up, you start reflecting, boy, I'm only going to live like 80 years or 90 years, and then be gone and forever, and what does that mean? So that's always in the back of everyone's mind. But hardly anyone extends that thought to, boy, if life is fleeting and that would mean that it's meaningless too. Because what is the purpose of being here? Most people don't take that next step. And so they know this, that life is fleeting, life is bogus. But then they set that aside so that they can get involved with life and seek pleasure while they're alive, have families, seek to have money, and so on and so forth. And it's an interesting kind of dualistic way of life. On one hand, you know that life is not worth living, and yet you're trying to live life anyway as if it is worth living. You try to have a family, you're trying to have children, so you can have progeny, and they can go keep on going after you're gone for who knows what purpose. So they can die too and cause more pain to more people. And to have children, and then you can have more hundreds of thousands of years of people coming into existence and for no reason and dying and having suffering. And there are different levels of suffering. You can suffer physically. You can lose an arm or a leg. You can be in a war zone and have your shoulder blown off. Have a cannon shot through your chest, so that your guts are hanging on the floor, and then you're looking at your guts, what the hell is going on? And then you slump over and you die. What the purpose of life is in that? So it seems funny, but it's not funny as people in Beirut right now. But we're talking from a standpoint of the ridiculousness and the foolishness of the world, and thinking about the world as if it's something worthwhile. From the standpoint of worthwhile as a reality in and of itself, as a physical reality that allows us to think that we are physical realities and that we have some worth beyond our illusory existence. That's what I mean. And in essence, I'm not saying that the world is not a wonderful place from the standpoint of it is a miracle, it is a magical, it is a wonderful creation of the divine. But the way people take it, it belittles that glory, is what I'm saying. Because if you look at the human body and the miracle that is the human body, how the human body turns, like our breakfast, a fruit breakfast and a muffin, it turns that into energy and it turns into consciousness, or conscious ability, shall we say, to experience the world. These are miracles. These are wonderful things. Scientists don't even know how it works. They can explain some of the things. So I'm not talking about that point. I'm talking about the philosophical aspect of the world as an abiding reality that is worthwhile from an egoistic perspective, from a sentimental perspective. Oh, we're going to have children, and we're going to, me and my spouse, we're going to live forever, and we're going to walk into the sunset, and this is real, and we're going to love each other, and there's never going to be any pain in the world, and we're going to have a wonderful time. All that is a ridiculous notion. But people know that intrinsically, and yet they can't take the full steps to discover the realization that comes when you relinquish your sentimental notions about the world. This is where the problem comes in. This is just a very quick on a visit to Benin, Pope John Paul II apologized for centuries of denigration of African religion by the Western culture. Up until the 1960s, especially the Western world religions have denigrated and discounted African religion as a religion. Before that, it was officially considered superstition at best, and primitive notions of religion at worst, I guess you might say. One of the reasons that they cited, that the early missionaries, when they were going into Africa, cited, was that the Africans didn't have a word for religion. So that proves that you don't have religion. That's like if you can play music, but you don't know how to read music, that means you're not a musician. Right? If you can talk, but you can't read, it means that you're an imbecile. You're a fool. You're mentally retarded. It's a ridiculous notion, and it's the kind of logic that was used for that. But nevertheless, discounting that notion itself, ancient Egypt contained a word or a term called Shetal Neder that means religion in terms of modern interpretation anyway. So this is an idea that is bogus as well. That's the hieroglyphic text for the term Shetal Neder. Shetal Neder, we're going to go into details as to what it means. And I talked about this a little bit. We'll go through it just a bit. Here's all of our happiness. We have our mates, and we feel so happy and go lucky. And we don't think how when we're 20 years old, everything's so wonderful and the world is so vibrant. But then when you get to be 40, then things start slowing down a bit. If you get to live that long, you have your children, and everything's so smiley and everything's so wonderful until they get sick or they get killed or something. You're playing your basketball unless you have ill health and you can't play anymore, and you get an injury. You're at work and everything is so wonderful. You have your suit and tie and you think that you're a great personality, you're God's gift to the world. You get your house, you're doing your exercise and your gated community, and you think that you're so well protected. You got your nice little sports car, so you can run around and feel that you control the world and the road. And then you run out of gas, you're stranded on the road, and you're see the guy wearing his suit, now he took off his jacket, now he has to get back into the world and roll up his sleeves. And you're at work, and then here somebody comes in. You're not so on top of the world anymore. You realize somebody's on top of you, telling you what to do, and then your stuff is not good enough. And this is what it's called searching for oneself in the world. You search for yourself through your spouse. You search for yourself through your progeny, through your body, thinking that you're going to be so healthy forever. When you're young, you don't think about it. Then one day you can't move so well, but you want to think that you're young anyway, so you start hanging out with young people, and then they start thinking that you're a jerk, but they don't tell you that to your face, because you don't grow up. And then the big house that you didn't need, you get foreclosed on you. And your sports car, you have to sell it because it doesn't fit your children anymore. And you start realizing that life is Life is trouble. Life is a venue for pain, actually. Pain mixed with pleasure. But more pain than pleasure. That's what people don't like to face up to, they don't like to realize. Grief is a natural Grief is natural to the mortal world and is always about you. Pleasure is a guest and visit by thy invitation. Use well thy mind, and sorrow shall be passed behind you. Be prudent, and the visit of joy shall remain long with you. This prudency that the teaching is talking about, and this invitation. The invitation comes by prudency. Prudency means right action. It means looking at the world properly. And as you believe, so the world comes to you. The world comes to you in reference to your perception, your understanding about the world. If you understand that the world is an illusion, you're going to approach it a particular way. If you believe that it is real, you approach it in a different way. And the different ways lead to your sorrow or your pleasure. So what is Shetal Neder? This is the term Shetal, and this is the term for Neder. Shetal means something secret, something hidden, something unfathomable. And Neder means divinity. And here are the two spellings for Neder. It could be Neter or Neger. So the term means the way or teaching about the hidden supreme being or divinity. The Neder symbol relates to divinity in an androgynous form. It doesn't relate to a male or female divinity, but really divinity transcending gender. Who are Netarians? This term means Shems. And Shemsu are the followers, those who follow the Neter. Now, in terms of Shems, Shems means to emulate, to act like, to do like, to feel like, to look like. If you do these things, you eventually become like. But you should not understand this in terms of self and other. What I'm getting is that you do not start to do the practice of religion meaning to act like, to do the disciplines, to do the rituals, to look like, meaning to do the dress, to put on the garb, to think like, studying the philosophy and attuning your mind to the teaching and so on and so forth. To speak like. You now do these things so that you can actually become like, in terms of thinking about it as something that you are not already. What you're doing when you do that actually is that you are changing from an illusory personality that you have created already to the actual personality that you are intrinsically. You follow that? What I mean is that you have the garb that people have taken in the world, the suits and ties and the colorful clothing of the West Africans, or the colorful clothing of the South American natives, or the Western clothing of Europe, whatever it may be. All that is, they have acted and they've taken on speech and they have taken on rituals that are in contradiction with their original true self. So what you're doing here is that you're actually taking on your true identity. Who was the founder of Unitarianism? The founder of Unitarianism, according to the scriptures, is Lord Khepri, or Khepra. And this is the hieroglyphic text for his name. This is the main symbol for Khepra, which is the scarab. And here he is in the form of Khepri-Ra, or Khepri-Ra, bringing forth the creation out of the noon. This is the god Noon, the primeval waters, with his boat of millions of years, which contains the divinities that assist him. And here he is in the papyrus of Ani being worshipped by Ani and his wife. Now it is said that Lord Khepri created the world and the teaching of Shedda Netter, but he did not write it down. Lord Jehuti came forth and wrote down the teaching that was given by Lord Khepri. Lord Jehuti in turn gave that teaching to Mistress Het-Heru, as well as Lord Asar and Mistress Aset. Aset and he's coming in too soon. Aset and Asar gave that teaching to Heru at bottom, and Heru became the quintessential symbol of rulership, of pharaonic rule for the kings and queens, as well as giving that teaching to the priests and priestesses. Priests and priestesses provide that teaching in a line of succession throughout history. They act as advisors to the pharaohs as well as to the entire culture through the temple system. So what is this purpose of life that Shedda Netter is dedicated to? The purpose of all human life is to achieve a state of consciousness apart from the body concerns. Men and women are to become godlike through a life of virtue and the cultivation of the spirit through scientific knowledge, practice, and bodily discipline. Salvation is the freeing of the soul from its bodily fetters, becoming God through knowledge and wisdom, controlling the forces of the cosmos instead of being a slave to them, subduing the lower nature, and through awakening the higher self, ending the cycle of rebirth, and dwelling with the Netters who direct and control the great plan. This is one of the songs of the harper. This is from one of the tomb reliefs. The harper songs are a particular genre of ancient Egyptian literature. I have heard these songs, which are in the ancient tombs, which tell of the virtues of life on earth, and make little of life in the Netter cemetery. Why then do likewise to eternity? It is a place of justice, without fear, where uproar is forbidden, where no one attacks his fellow. This place has no enemies. All our relatives have lived in it from time immemorial, with millions more to come. It is not possible to linger in Egypt. No one can escape from going west and of life in the netherworld. One's acts on earth are like a dream. Welcome safe and sound to whoever arrives in the west. There are many important features of this particular text. That's why I chose it. First of all, the harper is talking about tomb writings that talk about the virtue of life on earth. And he said, well, what about the virtue of eternity? The life after death, after the physical death. In life after death, it's a place of justice. You don't have to fear anybody. You don't have to lock your door at night when you go to sleep. You don't have to worry about somebody's going to mug you when you're on your way someplace. Get a carjacking. There's enemies there. You don't have to worry about all these things. So So why are you giving virtue to this physical world when you have this other world you may have to deal with all this stuff? And in any case, regardless of how you feel about it, everyone has to go to this netherworld anyway. You can't linger here in Egypt. You can't linger here in the world. So what's up with that? Why are you talking all this nonsense? That's what this text is talking about. And here is the real crux of the matter. Life is a dream. Life is a dream. And the older you get, the more you realize that. You think about what happened 10 years ago, what happened 20 years ago, what happened 30 years ago. Can you even picture in your mind exactly the way it happened? And if you realize philosophically that just as you cannot really picture something that happened to you, say 30 years ago, you can sort of remember some kind of impression about it, but you can't really picture it fully in your mind. And you certainly can't picture it fully in your mind the way it actually happened either. You realize that? Have you tried that? Have you go out and ask your mother, hey, you remember this that happened? I remember that. I don't remember that like that. It didn't happen like that. But you seem so convinced that something happened the way you think it happened. And because there's so many filters in your mind, and so much what we call RU, which means residues of your previous actions that color your mind. And they make you feel desires, or make you feel fears, or which color the way that you see things from the past. And if you look into the future with your imagination, you can't picture what that future might look like either. You may have a desire how you would like it to be, or a fear of how you don't want it to be, right? So what I'm getting is that the past as well as the future is illusory. And so if the present is going to become the past one day, what does that say about the present? It's illusory also. So what is the real? That's the question that should be being asked through your religious process. The real is the West, according to the Harper. The West is a term that in sum total means the attainment of spiritual enlightenment that is abiding, and that is the Western region. When you go to the West, if you get to go to the West, it means that you have reached the end of your journey. The journey wandering as an individual soul, coming into life and then dying, suffering, dying, and being reincarnated again. Think of the world, how the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. This is how the ancient Egyptian temples are built also, with this in mind. The east is the land of the birth of the sun, the birth of souls. And the problem is that souls don't usually go to the west. They just go into a holding region, like we were when we came here on the plane. We're in a holding pattern, going in circles, in limbo, until we're ready to land again. If we attained enlightenment, we would have gone, instead of going in patterns, we would have gone out of the stratosphere to outer space and never come back to the earth. I don't think everybody on the plane would want to do that, though. I don't think they got what I was saying. I'm trying to give you a little metaphor there, a little analogy. The West means that you've transcended, you've gone beyond the stratosphere, beyond the world. And you're not going to come back and land on Earth again. That was the analogy there. And the East means that you're going to be reborn again. And so the West, or Wazet, that is the goal of life. So the ultimate goal of this religious process is to awaken to that reality that is intrinsic or your innate nature to begin with. What has happened is that this intrinsic reality, this rebirth that has to occur so that you can experience what we call nihast, or awakening. This intrinsic reality that is your nature has been forgotten, has been subsumed in your relentless pursuit of worldly completeness, I would say, because that's really what people are seeking. If people are bombing other people, they're actually bombing them to seek their completeness. Because somehow killing these people are going to make you complete the way you think that you're supposed to be. If your religion says that you can kill everybody so that you can survive in your holy land, that's you're seeking your completeness in your idea of, which is your holy land, and your idea of what your tradition is supposed to be. And likewise, if your religion says forgiveness is the way, so on and so forth. But what I'm getting is that people are seeking all to have their conception of what completeness is. And in our idea of completeness, the completeness is nihast, or awakening, or enlightenment. This term can be translated as enlightenment also. A state wherein consciousness, or shall we say your higher consciousness, or your expanded existence, is discovered. And discovered, to your definition for that term, discover is not something that you go and find that is not known to be there, or that is not there already. Discovering, what we mean by this term in this context, is more like uncovering. I think would probably be a better term. Discovering gives you an idea of something that you did not know was there, something that did not exist before, and now you found it and now you have it. Uncovering means something that was there all the time, but you may not know that it was there, but it was always there, and it was always part of you. The forces of entropy. This is the God here. This is actually Setna Nebira in this particular scene. Setna Nebira was actually in a previous form Setek or Sutek. Sutek was the enemy of Ra and the enemy of Peru. He was trying to be the king of Egypt and tried to he actually killed Asar in order to assume the throne, and Heru put him down. And then, transforming into Setna Nebira, now he is a protector of the boat of Ra, protects the boat against the serpent Apep. Apep, or apathy, is what in the English apophis, is the quintessential form of degeneration in the physical world, or what's called entropy. Entropy is an innate movement towards dissolution. The world, in its particular form as it has been created by Ra, through the movement of the boat, and through Ma'at, is only a temporary development. And this happens with everything that you create. If you're a potter, so we say, you create a potter, a bowl of some kind. As soon as that bowl is created, it starts to degrade. It starts to disintegrate. If you wait 1,000 years, you can see some serious disintegration of it. Some pottery has been found that is like 5,000 years old. They found shards or pieces. If you come back 10,000 years, 20,000, 30,000, eventually you'll find it going into dust and actually dissolving back into the earth. In fact, everything in creation, including the world, everything is moving towards a dissolving process. What keeps it reforming is an artificial energy that is controlling it from outside. The potter's hands is that artificial energy that is forming the clay. You put the fire on it, and so on and so forth, it gets hard. But eventually, all that energy you put into it, it starts to disintegrate anyway. And so, this is why human beings, bring it right home for you, this is why you have to take a shower frequently. Try not taking a shower for a week and see what happens. You can have face-to-face meeting with entropy. And everyone is going to call you entropy, get away from me. Stay away from me. I can smell your entropy. Shadal Neter is one of the major African religions that we have listed here. And the main difference between African religions and other world religions, especially Western religions, is that African religion, it follows a henotheistic conception. This is probably the best way to explain it, or the simplest way to explain. The henotheistic concept essentially is this: that it recognizes that there is a supreme being, but it also recognizes that there are lesser beings, termed gods and goddesses, that assist the supreme being or do the work for the supreme being. Because the supreme being is so transcendental that it cannot, or it does not have direct entry into, or direct, how shall we say, direct dynamic action in the world of time and space. That is done through the lesser divinities. And you consider that, give a good example of this. The electricity that comes into this room, or your house, or wherever you are. If that electricity was wired in directly from the electric plant, it would blow out all the fuses or all the lights in the house. You have to have transformers to transform the energy from a higher voltage or higher amperage and so on and so forth to something that you can use in your house. So the Supreme Being is that power plant that is outside of town. And the wiring systems, the transformers, and everything that comes into the city, those are the gods and goddesses that handle the work for the Supreme Being. And in a sense, Christianity, for instance, is a henotheistic religion, although they would not accept that definition. Because you have God the Father, of course, and you have Jesus, who would be like a God, and you have Mary, and of course then you have the saints, and you have the angels, but they would not call them gods and goddesses. And just by so you have an idea of contrast. In Pentecostal, in evangelical, and Protestant, perhaps a little bit also, you have Jesus being elevated almost to the standpoint, or to the status of a God anyway. And you have to have your salvation through Lord Jesus Christ and all this kind of thing. When you call Jesus a God, they would not accept that. They would kill you because you say that. It's blasphemy. Although they treat him that way, they act that way. But if we do that here in African religion, they call us heathens and they call us pagans, and they say we're going to hell. So, and by contrast again, in the East, you have Hinduism, which is actually very, very close or it's actually a henotheistic process as well. Although these two, the African religion and Indian religions, especially Hinduism, do incorporate as well as the henotheistic philosophy, what is called how should I explain? Monism, but this is more of a advanced philosophy of this exact application. Because if you understand that Supreme Being is the underlying process or the substratum of all creation, operating through gods and goddesses, it's like the sun with the rays. If you are touched by the rays of the sun and you feel the warmth of the sun, actually you're being touched by the sun itself, aren't you? In essence, the gods and goddesses are actually manifestations of the Supreme Being in a form that is broken down, that is segmented so that human beings can understand the different functions of the Supreme Being. If you did what is exhorted in the pyramid text you're told that you must eat the gods and goddesses. You must learn how to cook them. You must learn how to prepare them for your meal. There's a morning meal of gods and goddesses. There's an evening meal of gods and goddesses. You, as an aspirant, are to learn how to prepare them. And you know how there are certain condiments you put in your food, a little salt, a little pepper, a little onion, so that it'll taste good. So all of those elements are your understanding of the spiritual practice, your practice of the religion. This is your salt and your pepper, and you're learning how to cook the divinities, studying their myths, learning how they are, how they act, how they feel, how they think. This is why you practice studying the myths. And then consuming the gods and goddesses means that you are actually beginning to internalize them. And just as when you eat food, as talked about earlier, you had breakfast this morning, you ate fruits, turns into life-sustaining force for you. In this concept, when you consume the gods and goddesses, you begin to become them. You begin to act like them, you begin to feel like them, you begin to think like them, and so on and so forth. There's an X that I have through there, meaning that in Western religion they reject this part. They reject the gods and goddesses. The thing also in African religion is that the Supreme Being is never worshipped. How shall we say? In practice, in physical practice. You worship the divinities, the gods and goddesses, because the Supreme Being is so transcendental that anything that you do in the world of time and space is ineffectual. It is what would be a good word to explain that? Ineffectual, but also inappropriate is probably a good word to use. In order to worship, you have to worship with like instruments. For instance, you're worshiping the physical gods and goddesses, which is what the Neteru are. This Neter is a Neteru. Then you must worship with physical objects. If you're going to worship the physical gods and goddesses that have form, and you see them here with their symbols and their characters and things like that, then you can use incense, you can use divine water, you can use lotuses. But how are you going to worship the the divinity that is beyond the physical world in conception. How are you going to reach that divinity with divine water, or with incenses, or with chants even? It doesn't work. And this is why you need what is called, this we have a term called Bas, or Bas. Bas means form. So you have divinity with form and divinity without form, or Anbas, or Anren. Divinity without name. This is the nameless divinity actually that's being talked about here. Without gender. These divinities here have gender. They have names, particular names, and particular hekau or chants for worship. And this is one of the teachings that Sage Abam talks about in the book very extensively. The worship, the like worship for like divinity. So the divinities of the lower realms, these are called generated divinities. And the divinity of the transcendental realm is called a non-generated divinity. So you cannot worship the non-generated divinity with generated objects, generated items. And that form of worship is a very advanced form of worship. I talked about it in a series a few years ago, and perhaps we'll talk about it in the next session. Essence, what had the last one. The Supreme Being is manifesting, therefore, through the lesser beings. So I'm getting at is that we may not be able to conceptualize this Supreme Divinity, but the Supreme Divinity is all around us all the time and everywhere through all the different forms of divinity. Like, for instance, the physical form. Shu, the air. Geb, the earth. Nu, the sky. Tefnu, the waters. The elements that compose the very world that we're in. The skin, the blood. In fact, the thought that you use to think in your mind are composed of subtle elements as well. Subtle forms of water, subtle forms of air, subtle forms of earth, and so on. If you were to go on a fast for long enough, you would deplete your mind's capacity to think. It's because you're withdrawing the subtle elements. The essence of who you are, your soul, would not die, but it would not be able to use the mind to think through the world of time and space, you follow? And this is why, if you practice meditation, you can reach actually a point where you do not need the mind to perceive existence, to perceive your own existence. You can exist without thinking. Ordinarily, most people need to think in order to exist. Like, was it Descartes that said, I think, therefore I am? Actually, that is incorrect. You are, and because you are, you can think. But you do not need to think in order to be. If you were to discover your essential nature devoid of thought, then you would discover the true self, which is the Aku, the glorious spirit that is within you, and that is one with the Supreme, with the Ra Aku, and that is what the glorious light system meditation talks about. 3 stages of religion: myth, ritual, and mysticism. Religion has to have these 3 steps in order for you to have a complete spiritual journey. If you are missing some of these steps, your religious practice is going to be limited. Most religious practice in the West is limited only to myth and ritual. And therefore, the mysticism or metaphysical aspect of religion is lost. So most people in the West do not experience ecstasy. They do not experience meditative absorption. And since they do not have ecstasy, they cannot have true peace in life. They cannot have true empathy. They cannot have true compassion for other human beings because they continuously experience themselves as individuals. When you have an ecstatic transcendental experience, you can feel your actual existence as transcending your physical personality, your individual personality. If you were to have enough expanded ecstasy, you would expand to realize your oneness with the entire universe. And if that was to happen, you would be considered a enhanced or awakened being. The process of studying the myths, practicing the rituals, the disciplines of the Shekha Metter, is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. In faith-based religion, the myth and ritual is an end in itself. If you practice myth and ritual, you are a practitioner of that religion, and you are going to the heaven of that religion, so-called. However, of course, we know that that does not work in practice, because those people who practice faith-based religions, myth and rituals only, they quickly endeavor to make hell on earth, and some kind of expectation to transcend the hell on earth that they've created so they can reach a heaven of their imagination. Contrast, those who practice mystic or experience-based religion, they move towards making peace, towards making ethics and righteousness and order in the world. And which is actually a movement of heaven on earth, which will actually transform or actually extend into a heaven, transcendental heaven as well. So these are the different kinds of movement of religion that we have working in the world. When was Nectarian religion practiced? The term Nectarian comes from Shedad Metter, as you know. The practice of Shedad Metter has been detected as early as 10,000 BC. And in the pre-dynastic era of ancient Egyptian religion. Coming forth from there, we have Indus Valley culture, the pre-Judaic Arabian religions, Sumerian religion, and these, especially Sumerian religion, and then, well, of course, we have much later, we have the Greek. The Sumerian religion, something I talked about in book African Origins, is very closely related to the ancient Egyptian in terms of iconography, in terms of some of the mythic forms and so on and so forth. I think Sarah Rothman was doing some research on that currently as well. We can talk to you about that after the program. The idea of this slide is to show you that all the religions that you know of in the world today, coming down to the present time, Buddhism, Taoism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and so on and so forth, all these are late-coming religions. 10,000 years before Christianity, and about 9,000 years before Judaism, ancient Egyptian religion was already in practice, and already in high culture. I think we went through this one already. There's a couple of things. We have a few minutes left, but I want to show you actually a couple of things. Let's see if we can make this a little larger. So the general principles of Shedal Neter are the following. The purpose of life is to attain the great awakening, Nihas, to know thyself. Shedal Neter enjoins the Shedi practice as the highest endeavor. Enjoins that it is the responsibility of every human being to promote order and truth, performance of selfless service to family, community, and humanity, protection of nature, protection of the weak and the oppressed, caring for hungry, caring for the homeless, equality for all people, equality between men and women, enjoins the justice for all, sharing resources, protection of and proper raising of children, and movement towards balance. And many of these, or most of these injunctions are taken directly, basing them from the 42 precepts of Maha. Now, just wanted to go over this section very quickly. Shedi 2. This is the key to ancient Egyptian religion. Shedi 2 means philosophy. And runs through the whole philosophy of Shedal Neter. Shedi 2. Shedi 2 is the key to ancient Egyptian religion because it is the third step, if you will. It is the philosophical step. It is the mystical step. Shetab means mysteries, and Shedi 2 means philosophy of the mysteries. That is a very direct translation of the term. Read for me, if you can.
Shedi 2. This Shetal, mysteries, rituals, wisdom, philosophy, about the Neter, are related in the Shedi 2, or writings related to the hidden teaching. And those writings are referred to as Medu Neter, or divine speech, the writings of the god Jehuti, ancient Egyptian god of the divine word. Also refers to any hieroglyphic texts or inscriptions generally. The term Medu Neter makes use of a special hieroglyph, which means Medu, or staff, walking stick, speech. This means that speech is a support for the divine. Thus, just as a staff supports an elderly person, the hieroglyphic writing, the word, is a prop which sustains the divine in the realm of time and space. That is, the divine writings contains the wisdom which enlightens us about the divine, Shetal Neter. If Medu Neter is mastered, then the spiritual aspirant becomes Makeru, or true of thought, word, and deed, that is, purified in body, mind, and soul. The symbol Medu is static, while the symbol of Keru is dynamic. This term, Makeru, uses the glyph Keru, is a rudder, or, like as in rowing, symbol of voice, meaning that purification occurs when the righteous movement of the word, when it is used to promote virtue, order, peace, harmony, and truth. So, Medu Neter is a potential word, and Makeru is the perfected word. The hieroglyph texts become useful in the process of religion when they are used as Hekal, the ancient Egyptian words of power, when the word is Hesi, chanted, and Shemai, sung, and thereby one performs dua or worship of the divine. The divine word allows the speaker to control the gods and goddesses. For example, the cosmic forces. This concept is really based on the idea that human beings are higher order beings if they learn about the nature of the universe and elevate themselves through virtue and wisdom.
Just to emphasize, the term Medu, that the words are a support. It's like a table, a table with legs. Legs are a support. You don't eat on the legs, right? You eat on the table part, on the top part. So what I was getting at here is that the philosophy is not in the words themselves. It's in the meaning of the words. The keru is a movement of the words. So the medu is the static words, the words like on a page. You begin to move them, begin to read them, begin to chant them, begin to understand and live them. That is what makes them useful or effective. If you only read, if your philosophy only stays at the level of Medu, that's like a faith-based religion when you have, say, when you have the perfect book. And this is not, I'm not just talking about Western philosophy. A sage, a yoga sage, once said that people fail in the practice of Hinduism because they revere the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Hindu Bible, essentially, but they don't study it. They don't read it. They say, oh, Krishna is the Lord of all. Krishna, 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 Krishna. So they say, Jesus, 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 Jesus. But they don't really read the Bible. It's funny, on one show, the comedy station, one of these shows, Jon Stewart show, or one of those shows, Colbert Report, they asked the congressman, you're so big on giving 10 Commandments into all the schools and everything. Can you name the 10 Commandments for me? You named 3? Okay.
It took a while.
And he let him stew in his little juices there. And that is Medu. That is not living the philosophy, not studying the teaching, and not living it. If the philosophy becomes Ma'keru, then you are perfecting the movement. So just because you move it, just because you're Keru, you know a lot of people like that, right? They can talk the philosophy, they have lots of little minutiae information memorized, but they don't really live it, they don't really adopt it. It's like you're wearing a garb, but you're not really, you don't really live the meaning of the garb. A lot of people can put on dashiki, doesn't mean they're African. A lot of people who are not born in Africa can put on dashiki and they adopt the philosophy and the teaching of the dashiki and what it means, and they can become African no matter where they come from. You follow? So these are the basic concepts that I wanted to go over with you for this particular opening lecture about what religion is supposed to be. I'm sure there could be much more discussion of that. And some of these concepts I took further in the new book called The Limits of Faith. You can go into some of the philosophical insights into the problems of improper practice of religion and so on and so forth. Time for questions. Questions?
Okay, I'm going to just raise your hands and we'll bring the mic over to you.
That's it.
Yeah.
You were speaking on the timeline of Egyptian civilization. I was just wondering, where does Atlantis and Lemuria kind of fit into that scheme of things then?
Okay, Atlantis and Lemuria. Atlantis and Lemuria don't really fit into the scheme because they never existed. They don't fit into the scheme. There were other cultures that existed before Kemet or contemporary with Kemet, but they were not high cultures. If you read the African origins, Cheikh Anta Diop did some researches, and other scholars have done researches on the myth of Atlantis. Realize that the myth of Atlantis comes originates with the writings of Plato, and Plato was receiving some information from his uncle, whose name was Solon. Solon, who had traveled to Egypt, who was told the story of Atlantis by he says, by the Egyptian priests and priestesses told Solon. Solon told Plato. Plato wrote about it. He wrote basically not very much about it. He just said, my uncle told me about the priests and priestesses of Egypt. They said that there was an ancient culture before our current culture in Greece. And then all the books and all the movies that you see about Atlantis are based on this, essentially. A few paragraphs or a few pages in a book that Plato was writing. It's essentially, if there is such a culture, it is believed to be the Minoan culture. The Minoans lived on an island that was just south of Greece, and they were actually part of Greek culture. They were part of ancient Greek culture. The time of Plato and the time of Socrates, Aristotle, this is called classical Greece. There was a period before the classical Greek culture in which the Minoan society was advanced. I talked about in the African origins. They were actually strongly associated with ancient Egypt, and you see a lot in their iconography, and also many Egyptian artifacts have been found there as well. But what I'm getting at is that if there is such a culture, it is believed to be that one, because that one predated the classical Greek culture, and they derived a lot from it. That culture was destroyed by a volcanic eruption at about 1400 BC or something like that. But there are no other records or archaeological evidences of any other Greek culture predating that one.
There is a section in African Origins too.
I think it's true.
Volume 2, or the complete volume in the middle section there that talks about Atlantis.
Okay. And as far as Lemuria goes, that's
Okay. I have a question. I have quite a bit of lucid dreams at times, and they're quite intense, and to the point that I know I'm asleep, and I know my spouse is next to me, and it's like every week almost, and they're very intense, and I didn't know exactly where were they coming from, and were they coming from a place of me worrying and stress, or were they something else? And they haven't been bad dreams. They've been intense, and I'm not quite sure how to approach them.
Do you practice meditation?
Yes.
What kind of meditation? Practice.
Basic meditation, breathing and visualization, and detachment, calmness, basic.
Well, I mean, what specific technique of meditation do you practice?
It will probably be visualization meditation. That's about it. You know, very basic. I'm here to.
Okay, no, because what I'm getting is that visualization is not really a, visualization is like a stage
Right.
in the practice of meditation. When we speak of meditation, we're talking about a specific discipline that allows you to reach a point transcending thought. And the reason why I started answering your question by asking about that is because when the mind starts to spontaneously push itself into lucid dreaming, it is because it does not have a proper outlet. It's for two reasons. It's because your personality is spiritually ready to have transcendental awareness, transcendental experience, to expand, in other words. That's number one. Number two is that it's not having a proper outlet. Proper outlet should be in your meditative practice. And if you'll notice that if you do a proper meditative practice, the lucid dreaming will reduce because you'll have a proper outlet in the meditative practice itself. The lucid dreaming is a stage where you are aware, as for everyone should know from doing readings and things like that, but it's a point where you are aware of yourself as you may be aware of yourself as a physical being, but also aware of yourself as a mental being, as an astral being as well. Or you may just be aware of the astral aspects without thinking too much of the physical aspect. The difference, though, of a lucid dream is that you are having a dream, but you know that you're having a dream. In meditative practice, you go perhaps even you go a step further because you're actually leading yourself to that, and you consciously know that you're leading yourself to that, so you're in complete control of your faculties, and you're aware of your expanding nature and so on and so forth. In a lucid dream, you're not so aware or so in control, and so your expanded experience is going to be not fully enlightening, shall we say, because you're still caught up in the matrix of the dream itself, the dream process. So what I would say is that you need to practice a more dynamic technique of meditation, so that you can have that experience in a controlled fashion and in a more effective fashion. That's what needs to happen. So that was number one, because your mind is ready to expand, and if you don't have a proper outlet, it'll force an outlet. It'll force the experience. And that's what most people experience that. But not most people. Most people who are ready, a certain level, experience that. But they are, if they experience that, they tend to discount it. So, this is a good dream. This is not reality. This is crazy. I don't want to think about it. Or they tell somebody, so you're losing your mind, or you go to a psychiatrist, take some Xanax, or take some Valium or something, or let's put you in a rubber room or something. So that's what that is.
Greetings. I had a question about the section you read, lectured on. I wrote down a few things. That life is not worth living. Children having their children and doing life again. Is it worthwhile life? The glory is in living life according to the divine. That's kind of like what I wrote. But to really expand that, because we find ourselves in these relationships, in these mindsets, and to really clarify what the focus is in life, if it's not all these things that we've associated being happy with.
To clarify, what again?
Purpose of life. Clarify the purpose of life and how we should look at life from what was accomplish that?
Well, let me put it this way. The purpose of life is not to, I like to talk about some of the unseemly aspects of life, because people don't usually face them. If you realize that most of you are probably here, not because things are going well in your life, or because things are so wonderful, or you have great relationships, or you're rich, if you're all doing that, you'd probably be in Hollywood somewhere. You'd be having a good old time, on the French Riviera, right? But something happened. You had some trouble, some relationship issue, somebody died, or you got sick, or something, and made you stop and think, what the hell is going on here? What is all this about? I had my little baby, and then she was taken away from me. And that dispassion is a natural, or shall we say that adversity is a natural inducement towards dispassion. And that dispassion is supposed to grow into spiritual devotion, devotion to teaching, devotion to answering the important questions of life. If that dispassion turns to dullness, meaning if that dispassion does not turn into understanding and the need for the inquiry of life, it can turn to fanaticism, fundamentalism. It can also turn to dullness and to hatred. Like I had an aunt who loved her husband very much, and then lady got sick and died, and she never forgave God for that. The rest of her life, she had a bitter life. She was always hatred, and talk about God. She would start cursing everybody and things like that. And that turned to dullness and hatred. And other people that have a death in the family, that has a problem, a brush with death, and they turn towards fundamentalism. Praise God. God is everywhere. God is everything. Going to church every day, every hour about God. God, 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 God. Jesus, praise Jesus. Lord Jesus, this is Jesus here. And you can have that in other religions as well. I was giving those as common examples because we know them. So and I'm saying that to say that we talked about the world as being an illusion, as being ineffectual, as being bogus. But I also talked about the world as actually a miracle. It's actually a wonderful. So keep that in mind right now. Let me say one more thing. I'll put it all together. Questions have been asked about Ra. Why does Ra come into existence and go out of existence? That would tend to mean also point to the fact that the world is illusory and the world comes into existence and then dissolves back out of existence. That's one way to look at it. But consider also, like I said, about the sun and the rays. If the rays of the sun are a reality of the sun, then both are realities. And from the standpoint that we can say that you're touching God, you're touching the sun, and the rays are touching you. You don't have to go up, 93 million miles and touch the sun and burn your hand off to say, oh, I touched God, right? So getting at is that, therefore, if you were to discover your true nature, you will discover the underlying reality of the world, transcending the fleeting aspect of it. And that is the purpose of life. And if you were to discover that, you would have peace now. You would have enlightenment now. You would not have to go, in some world beyond, or go to some other country, or find someone to make you happy, or get $1 million. You can have those things, but it wouldn't make a difference. So that the purpose of life is to discover the truth of your own nature, the truth of the cosmos, the truth of all existence, which is here and now. It's not just in the hereafter.
Is life by truth, do we mean essentially enlightenment?
Yes, it's the same thing. And if you only have faith in religion, you're not going to discover truth. Because all you're going to have is faith. All you're going to have is a belief system. Faith-based religion exhorts you to have faith and a belief. So this is why you can say, oh, I believe. If I'm a Christian, I believe. But in a Trinitarian culture, belief and faith is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. So you cannot say that you are an enlightened being unless you attain enlightenment. You cannot say you're an enlightened being just because you believe in enlightenment. Well, okay, that's going to be the time for this session now. It's going to be what's next on the schedule.
We're going to do the worship, noonday worship.